Welcome back to the Burstimo Music Marketing Podcast. Today we're talking about goals and goal setting and why it's so important for your music career. Do you want to start us off then? Why it's so important?
I think quite often we get asked things such as, why am I not successful? And how do I succeed in the music industry? And it depends for each artist as to what you define as successful. Because if someone messages us saying, why am I not successful yet? And it's like, well, what have you achieved? You might be really successful in some artists' eyes.
Yep.
So I think having goals, making them challenging but realistic if you really, really work for it, is key to your music career, because otherwise you're sort of working and you might be developing or you might be going at a really slow pace and you can't really work out how you're progressing.
I think that's a really interesting point, especially as we get to see the other side of it, and so many artists coming to us saying, how do I get to my first 100 followers? We've got one artist with that same amount of stress level trying to get to 20,000 followers. So having the right goals, knowing like how far you have come is an achievement in itself. It depends how you measure success.
So I think the first thing to sort of think about is, what do you define as successful? Do you define as successful being a full-time musician? Because if that's the case, then there are a lot of artists right now that are successful, but you might already be a full-time musician, so you might not think you're successful yet. So work out what your definition of success actually is, and then from there work out kind of how successful you currently are. Because if your definition of success is being a full-time musician and you're not a full-time musician, you're not successful yet. So take those steps first of all, I think, and then you can work out kind of your macro and your micro goals around that.
And I always remember when people say that millionaires, the one thing that they wish they could go back and tell themselves is that to enjoy the journey to success. And so many of them say, when you lose that hunger and you like, was it the chase is better than the catch? Is basically the saying. And I think that is so true. When you hit all of your goals and you've got nothing to wish for, you realize you actually did start to enjoy the journey, and having somewhere to go is something to enjoy. And if you are playing to a small audience and you absolutely love doing music and you do music every single day and you're on a journey, then you have to enjoy it, because that is essentially you should already be happy and content with where you are at the moment, and actually having goals and appreciate those goals.
I think that's so true, because if you look at some of the most successful artists in the world, how many of them stop performing? How many of them say that doing live shows is exhausting for them and they don't enjoy doing it? How many of them retire, go to drugs and things like that? So many of them do, because it becomes boring. But right now you might be playing to a room of 100 people and having the time of your life. And imagine at this point instead you were playing to an arena and you were actually hating it and you were dreading going on stage. That, I think, is because if you don't enjoy that journey and think about that whole process and enjoy kind of each action you have to take to get to that end goal, you get a little bit stuck, because when you're at that end goal already, what are you working for?
I always liken it to like when, I don't know if you played video games when you were a kid, but when you complete a video game, you dream of like attaining that car to drive or that weapon or whatever. And when you've got them all, you think it's going to be amazing, and actually you've got to start a new game now. And it's very much like that. And I think enjoying the process is so important, because that's when you can bring your A game. Like, no journey and is ever worth doing, and nothing's worth achieving that isn't hard work. And there will always be dips where you consider quitting, and that's kind of the first hurdle where everyone quits, and that filters out the first lot of people who just tried but failed. And then another hurdle comes, and then it filters out more people, and then it's you at the very end who is able to jump through those hurdles. And they're just obstacles to basically strive and kind of test you to get rid of everyone else. Otherwise, everyone would be rock stars, everyone would be famous if it was that easy.
Who was it written by? The Dip?
Dip with Seth Godin. Yeah.
A really, really good book, both of us read. And basically it talks about the process of any journey to success. And that's kind of relatable for artists as well. And it's the idea that every journey, as you said, will have dips, and those hurdles are tests for other people. But also sometimes those dips prove to you whether something isn't successful.
Yeah.
So say you are releasing music and you're unsure of a certain track, and it really flops, there will be a reason for that. That dip is there for a reason. It's showing you that that music isn't strong enough and it's not the kind of route you should go down. But there are certain situations where if you are having dips, that's just normal. So one example we always use is live shows. Your first few, you're probably going to sell out. You're probably going to do amazingly because your friends, your family, your already existing fan base are going to come. After that point, when you're growing more and you're going to bigger venues, you're going to be playing to more empty rooms.
Yeah.
And that's going to feel like a dip, but that's a normal process in a musician's career, because you can't continuously play to sold out crowds, because if you're playing every weekend, they're not going to want to come every weekend. So those kind of dips are normal, but it's just measuring whether a dip is normal and is part of the journey, you have to push through it, or it's a sign that you need to stop.
Absolutely.
And it's not actually going in the right direction.
Yeah.
But no, go for it.
Basically what I was going to say was, on social media, I find that a lot of people, not just music, they only see the top 1% or 3% of what's going on in other artists' careers or other people's lives. And they forget about the rest, and they don't understand that social media is designed to show you the best of everyone's lives. Because if you play to an empty room, you're probably not going to post it on your Instagram. And if you play empty room after empty room after empty room, one time it might be funny for a joke that no one showed up to my show. The third time it stops being funny and you start to worry, and you don't post on your social media. So think about those people and think about how that works. The fact that when you take out Instagram and you start scrolling, no one is putting their worst bits on. No one is putting when things aren't going well for them. And suddenly things start going well, bang, things go on Instagram. Let's put it on Instagram. And that is how social media works, and it can really mess with how you set your goals and your timeline of how successful you think you should be at this point in your life. Because every night you go home, take up your phone, and you're comparing yourself to others, and it's reminding you of where you are not. It's reminding you of where you have not achieved in your career, not necessarily saying, look how far I've come.
Yeah, I also think it can sometimes make really unrealistic expectations. So the amount of times that people say, why have I not got an editorial playlist? My track is a banger. And we always say there are over 40 million tracks on Spotify, over 4 million of which have never been listened to, and there's about 4,500 editorial playlists. The chances are very slim. But because you're seeing them all over social media, you think everyone's getting them besides you. But those other 30 million tracks, 35 million, 38 million tracks that aren't on those playlists, you're not seeing them, are you? So I think having realistic goals, but that are also challenging, are so important, because there is no point your main goal being getting 100,000 streams, or even 1 million streams, because you could get added to an editorial playlist tomorrow and it means you get 1 million streams within a week. Yeah. And then you've hit your goal, and then what?
Yeah,
and then it's
exactly.
like, oh, okay, where do I go from here?
And that's the same thing as what I talk about the top 1% as well with Spotify. You look at all these emerging artists with millions of streams. Forget about all the others who didn't make it, because you just don't see them. They're buried on Spotify.
Same as major label artists. Everyone wants to get signed to majors because they see the charts being major label artists. But majority of people that get signed to a major label get dropped, or they don't continue their contract, because of course not everyone's going to succeed being signed to a label. It doesn't mean that they immediately blow up. So I think that is really important. Sit down and kind of think to yourself, what do I want to achieve? Forget about everyone else. Forget about what you're seeing on social media, what your friends are saying. Do nothing to impress anyone else. Just think, what do I really want to achieve? So I think it's kind of split up into that overall macro goal. And then you need to then split that up into those micro goals. So that could be weekly, monthly, yearly. So let's start with that macro goal. What kind of things can people set as that overall goal?
I think number of followers on social media, number of streams, gig tickets sold. Yeah, I'd say is essentially for a musician.
I think bigger. I think like a macro goal should be like, so for example, like a lot of like the artists that are the biggest artists in the world right now, like a Little Nas X, Old
Yeah.
Town Road. His goal with his second release, he said, now my overall goal is to make every single song I release to go viral.
Okay, yeah.
So I think that macro goal needs to be like huge.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, say for example,
Okay, you mean like one big goal?
Yeah.
Okay,
So the macro
okay.
is like your overall biggest goal of all time. Like, why do you create music? What do you want to achieve with it? That could be something as simple as I want my message to reach as many people as possible.
Yeah.
So then those micro goals will be like, okay, I need to then increase my social media following.
Yeah.
I need to then increase my streams. I need to
Yeah.
be reaching more people through ticket sales. So I think that macro is like, I don't know, signed to a major label might be many people's because they feel like they need that money. Other people's might be an arena tour.
Yeah.
I mean, some of you might be like biggest artist in the world, get like a number one.
Yeah. So you're saying work backwards?
Yeah,
From the
I
macro
think so.
goal. Yeah.
Because then you can set those goals that lead up to that overall one.
Yeah.
So-
And how do you set your timeline? How do you know how long it should take?
Kind of based on that, how big that overall goal is.
Yeah.
I also think just sit down realistically and think, okay, when do I want to achieve this?
Yeah.
Because being realistic, you're not going to become the biggest artist in the world in a year.
Yeah.
That might be a lifetime that you want to work on that. But then from there, you can set those yearly, those monthly goals that can lead up to it.
Yeah.
But what I think people always find the hardest is like, what's realistic?
Yeah. And also, a growth of an artist is exponential. It's not a straight line graph.
Yeah.
So you don't just consistently grow. It tends to be you get all the early adopters and then you start to build some hype, you build some fans. One thing to remember is just how hard it is to get a single fan. Like how hard it is for, even if you're a musician yourself, what does it take for you to say, I'm a fan of that artist? It takes a lot. And it's exponential because more and more people have word of mouth. They tell each other about artists and you need to go and listen to this artist.
Yeah.
And the more you hear about an artist, the more credibility it has, the more likely you're going to go and listen. And that's why the growth is exponential. It's not because of more money or because they get signed. It's just because of word of mouth.
Yeah. So I think kind of first of all, thinking about that timeline.
Yeah.
So having that overall goal and then working out yearly and then monthly goals kind of leading up to that. But I think another thing that artists find very difficult is measuring the success of like their actions to reach those goals. So say your monthly goal could be, I want to reach 50,000 streams on a release. Something like that is so easy to measure because if you haven't hit it, you haven't hit your goal. But something like, I want to increase my fan base. Do you base that on followers? Do you base that on ticket sales? Do you base that on engagement?
Yeah.
Those kind of things you have to sort of ask yourself and know in the lead up to achieving that goal.
Yeah. And also what happens if you're not actually going to achieve your goal as well? How do you get back on it? Because for me, it's I think everyone knows the answer of getting back on it is simply just say, well, everyone has setbacks, get back on it. But I always think that if you want to achieve a goal, you have to have kind of one thing in mind, just one simple thing in your head, which gets you back on track. And you ask yourself, do I want to do this or do I want to reach that macro goal? And that macro goal always has to be in your head.
Yeah.
And it could, but I mean the macro goal, but it can be kind of just one little thing, one little moment that you are going to have. And you can say, do I want to give up on my music career or do I want this one thing to happen? And you've always got to have that in mind. And I find that you've got to understand that you will miss goals sometimes. It's going to happen. And I think people think they're going to fail when they miss a target, and you're not going to fail. You reassess why you didn't hit that target, figure out what the new target is. Maybe you were unrealistic, maybe you made mistakes, and then reassess and then think about that big macro picture and just get motivated again by having that one thing in your mind.
Yeah, I sometimes think like visualizing it as well can really help. So say that one thing that you have in your mind, say for some artists that might be to play a certain venue. Like loads of artists, their dream is to play something like Madison Square Garden. If you have like that dip, just like visualizing the idea of like, I could be playing that one day, could be the thing that's like, oh, why was I even worrying about how that track flopped? And I think also it's so easy to not secure your goal in those early stages of an artist's career as well, because it's so speculative. Something like Spotify, the algorithm can help push it out. and say you didn't have much success in those first few weeks, the algorithm won't really help it out that much further.
No,
so there are some really small things, even timing, like the day that you release it. Say you release a track and you've been on Spotify editorial playlist before and you were expecting a New Music Friday. If you're competing with some of the biggest artists in the world that are guaranteed to get on that playlist, you won't be on it. And that was just really unlucky. There are certain things that you have to sort of sit back and be like, that's a shame, but I'm going to get back on it.
Yeah, there's a lot of luck in the game as well. That's the one thing we hear the most of, how artists got lucky to make it. But essentially, you've got to make your own luck. So if there's luck in the game, then make your own luck by just creating lots of opportunities for yourself to be lucky.
Yeah.
And it's something that I say a lot, which is there's no such thing as kind of lucky people, unlucky people, but the people who think they are lucky make decisions as if they are lucky. So therefore, they are lucky people. I'm going to put out loads of tracks and see which one gets on New Music Friday. Unlucky people say, I was really unlucky to get that, not get that track on New Music Friday. So guess I'll just stop then. It's people who always assume that they're going to get lucky actually do get lucky, and it's not because they are, it's because they're creating opportunities for themselves.
Yeah, it's the same as there was quite a big time where loads of artists were getting discovered on YouTube. So Justin Bieber, Jessie J, and everyone's always like, they were so lucky, how did they get discovered? Both of them were creating so much content for their YouTube channel. Alex worked for a management company, or is it a label that discovered her. She didn't just post one video and fingers crossed that someone discovers her. Same as Justin Bieber. He sat in his room with a little guitar and his high-pitched voice singing day in and day out. And those people made that luck for themselves. And their goal probably wasn't to get discovered by those people. Their goal was just to get their music out there and build a fan base. And it just so happened that luck came to them.
And Jessie J's YouTube channel is still live. It's under Jessica Cornish. If it's still live, we'll link it down below so you can go check it out. And it's literally her just sat in her bedroom just singing to the camera.
I think we've covered the majority of what we wanted to cover today. I hope you all found it useful, and we'll be back soon with another one.